from the moment I watched my first Destiny video, as well as reading the massive amounts of material on the Destiny Universe website, I was pretty much hooked. And I had just 3 months prior to that spent 2 weeks in jail from an unpaid traffic ticket of which I was supposed to do community service on, and I lacked a few hours of community service, so I was arrested and put in jail for 26 days without bond. Now, as it turned out, I had twisted my ankle and I had crutches, and so the first 2 days of my time in jail was spent in solitary confinement. I did end up getting out 2 weeks later for good behavior, but those first 48 hours in solitary confinement had posed an interesting question to myself, in that I didn't have the TV to look at, I didn't have entertainment, I wasn't able to smoke. I was still smoking then, and I wasn't able to take drugs. I was on pain pills, and all I had was myself. All I had was my thoughts. And for 48 hours, I sat in the room, a little square cemented room, and avoided my thoughts, tried to sleep away my thoughts. I just wanted to be out of there. I didn't want to be locked away with the amount of thoughts that I began to realize I had going on within my mind. And so that was a particularly amazing wake-up call for myself, actually. And so when I heard the Destiny message and I began to hear them speak about how to stop fear and how to stop your thoughts and to face yourself in self-honesty and to apply self-forgiveness, I remember literally realizing that how valuable those tools would have been for me when I was in a 48-hour solitary confinement, as well as the rest of the 2 weeks that I was there. And so the fact that I could see myself within the material that they were presenting, and I saw the common sense, and I began to hear and make sense of within myself, it was as though the message resonated within me in a way that I didn't really understand, but I knew that it rang true, and that this very well could be a way to stop the fears that I had been participating in. You know, my grandmother used to tell me, when things get too much for you, just tie a knot and hang on. But the fact is, I was at the end of the rope and there was no more rope to tie a knot to hang on. And I was disgusted and pissed off at myself for the decisions that I had made and for the lack of responsibility. And I didn't even ever consider not hearing the message from the moment I began to hear it. And another point stood out to me was how we can have one singular memory, and that particular memory, it controls us, and we base our decisions and who we are and our actions according to one singular memory. And that rang true with me, because from the time that I was 5 years old, I can remember a memory that, as I looked at it closer, I could tell how I had literally just compounded that memory with another memory right on top of it in my attempts to avoid the original point within me that I was not facing within that memory, within the fears and the judgments and the self-justifications and the points of manipulation that I existed as, that I applied myself as in order to validate myself through other people. Simply avoidance of self and taking self-responsibility. And it was validated through my relationship with my stepfather, through which I would have statements of information that I had thought of or heard or seen or read about things or people or situations, and within that I formed emotional feeling connotations within my own mind. And then within the emotional and feeling connotations, I could relate that statement of information based on my past experiences with my stepdad. I identified with that statement of information, and I validated it based on self-identity and self-definition. It was what I was believing it to be and thinking about it to be and judging myself accordingly and believing that my stepdad hated me, and when really it wasn't that case at all. I got to a point where I actually believed the man was abusive to me, and he wasn't. I mean, no more than any other parent struggling to make ends meet and just working to provide for their children. Just that alone, the money plays such a factor in our survival that we tend to become short with our children, and we have expectations of them that we wouldn't normally have if we weren't already experiencing the pressures of providing for them. In our current money system, that is how our families exist. That is how all relationships exist. And as I began to apply self-forgiveness, it was very cool to realize that one particular memory I had was when I turned 12 years old on my birthday, and I was asleep in my bedroom that morning, and my dad just come bursting into my bedroom and started spanking me. And I was asleep. I didn't understand what the hell was going on. I remembered thinking more than anything that, like, what the fuck did I do? And when I heard my mom say happy birthday, that they said they were playing. And within that moment, I became just humiliated and embarrassed and pissed off more than anything. And I had thoughts of how dare him, who does he think he is, doing this to me on my birthday? It's not funny. And for years I carried around that singular memory of what I thought of him that day. The way that I would experience myself in my life around my dad, my stepdad, and around men in general was completely related to that particular memory. So as I was applying and finishing up a lesson in Destiny I process, I began to walk that memory construct of that particular morning when he came in there. And an interesting thing that I became aware of was a point within myself on that morning when he was spanking me was that for a brief moment, I knew that he was playing, but I didn't allow myself to be aware of it at that particular moment because I was too busy enjoying being pissed off. I was too busy feeling sorry for myself. But what was interesting to me the most was I had not remembered that moment. I had not remembered that I knew he was playing until I walked this point, this construct in my Destiny I process lesson, and that's when I went. I knew this all along, but yet for 40 years I allowed myself to abuse myself. And as such, I literally abused the rest of my world. And it's not always particularly easy when you realize that you've accepted and allowed, just through participation in self-judgment, in greed and self-interest. Within those participations with the thought processes that go on, with the amount of dishonesty that self exists as within that, and the lack of equality against life, it literally begins to manifest. And that is how we have created this world as it is. And so these singular memory points was a point of polarity in the good, bad, the right and wrong, and fluctuations of energy within that. As far as one moment I was up, one moment I was down. I was up and down and up and down. And when I began to hear the Destiny message, I knew that I didn't have anywhere else to go except to face myself within. And what Destiny proposes is, in fact, as real as I've ever known anything to be. And it has been the most rewarding journey that I've ever personally experienced. And it's not even honestly an experience, it's a becoming aware of yourself and the responsibility that you actually carry, as well as each and every living being here, in bringing about a world that supports according to what's best for all, that actually cares what happens to another, that is actually interested, that considers that there are actually children starving to death daily, thousands of children, and realizing yourself within it. And it's a process I am continuing to walk, and realizing what I've accepted as far as that point of acceptance within myself, that point of acceptance that goes beyond anything of worth to self other than knowing that you're reaching this core part of yourself where you can actually reverse who you have been, and you can actually reverse the madness and the bullshit that you've participated in through personalities and identities. And you begin to look at it and you go, I know how it wasn't real. I see now that I could have breathed through that I can breathe through that, and I do not have to be affected by it. I do not have to have points of energy that create a point of polarity within myself, remain within that physicalness of it all. So we can bring about a world that we can begin with an equal money system, a world that will actually exist where we're not competing and we're not existing in greed and we're not trying to outdo and outlast and out-earn and outplay, and we'll be able to enjoy each other, to actually enjoy each other's expression, where we're not anticipating ourselves to be competing in one way or another just to survive. So that is how the Destiny message caused me to listen. And because of that direction that I chose, I have given myself the ability to re-educate myself and to build self-trust through investigating my world and not assuming and accepting what it is that is before me, whether it's starvation or judgment or animosity or guilt, and being able to recognize those points of self that self has existed as is remarkable, and it is something that is worth investigating just to see for yourself. It's an accumulation of walking a process daily, breathing, and remaining aware of yourself. And sometimes I fall, but I already know I have an agreement with myself, and that agreement is I have the will to continue to assist and support in bringing about an equal money system and heaven on earth, to bring about a world where all life can actually express and be and live abundantly with each other. And that is how Destiny has assisted me. They have assisted me to realize myself within everything that's here. And the point of equality was at first difficult for me to comprehend, and that was just a point of acceptance within myself, because I had accepted the way the world is and the way that the struggles continue. And once you begin to actually investigate, you begin to see that it really was just a point of a lack of education. And now I'm aware of how an equal money system is the ultimate solution. One must become willing to realize that the change that is required in this world is first required within self, in self-honesty. And then once that begins, you can begin to will yourself to investigate and educate yourself with regards to how we can create heaven on earth with an equal money system.